Hello, listeners. David Newton here. I hope you are having as much fun listening to the program as I am producing content for it each and every week. Although this is a free podcast for all of our listeners, contributions from supporters really help me to keep this going. To show your support, please visit roostertailtalk.com and locate the support tab. Every contribution helps this podcast to continue to bring you more hydroplane news, interviews, and history. Now, enjoy the show. Roostertail Talk, a podcast dedicated to everything related to the sport we all love, hydroplane racing. I'm your host, David Newton, and it's time once again, so sit back, relax, and welcome to Roostertail Talk. It is May 12th, 2020, and this is episode 34. Today's episode is part 2 of our Charlie Grooms interview. Last week, we left off with Charlie talking about the Homestreet Bank sponsorship. As we pick up today, Charlie goes into the purchase of the bud shop for the Miss Madison team. We talk about the future of the sport. He shares his favorite Bernie Little story. And we even talk about what it means to share the sport with his family. I'm not sure if it's conjunction with the Homestreet Bank or if you guys did it on your own, but not too long ago, the bud shop was obtained by you guys. Can you talk us through how that went through and what it took to kind of reopen that bud shop?
That's kind of a long story. It actually took me 7 months.
Oh wow!
Okay. To get that done, but 7 months and 8 attorneys, all the different parties. But it was a great experience for me. But actually, the genesis of that thing really was that. Homestreet asked us why we weren't top qualifier. Mark Mason's a very competitive guy, and why aren't you the top qualifier? And it wasn't in the context of you should be doing this, that, or the other. It was just general talk. Mm-hmm. We said, well, at the time we've got a boat that's I think 10 or 12 years old. I think it was 2007, so maybe it was 10 or 11 years old. Mm-hmm. And it'd been wrecked and crashed, and Steve had done a number of things to it, and luckily only blown it over once, and that really wasn't it was a blowover, but he drove it back to the dock. Mm-hmm. So, but it was it was a little heavy, and had some challenges, and so we just said, hey, there's certain things that you can and can't do, primarily with weight. And so we made the case that a new boat would allow us the flexibility to do the things we really wanted to do to prove that what our goals and objectives could be met. And so, well, what's it cost for a new boat? Was the next logical question. And I told them, and they said, well, give me a quote. And so I went around, and it turns out that there are a number of guys out there that have molds. Mm-hmm. So we could rent molds from this guy or rent molds from that guy, or maybe have Ron Jones do something because Ron had built the 07 boat, or at least provide the parts. Mm-hmm. And so we scouted around, and I was aware that there were parts for a new boat in the molds at the bud shop. And so I called Mark Smith, and he said, I don't know, just, you need to call Joe Little. So I called Joe, and I'd known Joe forever and ever because obviously I raced with him and his dad. And, he just said, hey, I've been at it for quite a while. Why don't you just buy the whole thing? And I said, oh, okay. What's that entail? And so we went back and forth. And over a period of days or weeks or whatever, I recall, it doesn't make any difference really. But Joe said, why don't you just buy it all? And you build it right there in the shop. And so I went to Mr. Mason and said, here's option A, here's option B, here's option C, which one you like? Mm-hmm. And we had done our due diligence on all three options. Mark's very much a business guy. So, this wasn't happenstance, it was fact-based, fact-driven. Here's what your options are,
Mhm.
which is what he's always told me. He's always a pragmatic guy and a business guy, extremely busy. So there's not, when it comes to real business with Mark, it's not much small talk. It's okay. Here's the business. What are the options? What are my options? And so I gave him his options, and he said, I want that option. Okay, I'll take care of it. So I did. And the option he picked was to buy the stuff from Joe Little.
Mhm.
He felt like that had the most broad range of upside for the sport. I think Mark's not naive enough to know that the sport has many, many challenges. And so his real goal and objective at that time, and still is, to help the sport. Obviously help his team, but to help the sport. And we felt like that opening that thing up on some level and providing, at the time we had a dyno, and at the time we had a lot of space and those things, that there would be benefit gain throughout the sport for a number of teams. I didn't know for certain what was there. I mean, we knew that there had been a bunch of stuff there, but over the years it had been sold or bartered or used or given away or stolen, or God knows what all the stuff was, in that shop was still there. So we didn't spend days or weeks doing an inventory of every nut and bolt screw in the place. We just said, hey, Joe, here's the price. Just change the locks on the door. Whatever's there belongs to us. And that's what we did. And with the sole intent of building us a new boat, which we desperately felt like we needed. But it did a number of things to really kind of, as I mentioned earlier with Homestreet, it added to the business objectives that they wanted to accomplish. And so that's what we did. And it turned out to be a win-win for everybody, at least for a short period of time. We still have challenges, using the shop because a lot of guys in the Seattle area have their own shops. Right. But we try real hard to help H1 as well as the teams whenever possible, as much as possible. So it's kept the shop open. It's kept it a viable option for those that want to use it. And we're extremely proud to have had it, kept it going, and add to what Homestreet wants to do, which is help our sport.
Yes, yeah. Well, I know a lot of people are out there really thankful that you guys have done that, and it's there's a lot of history in that building, so it's nice that that's still going on, and there's still hydroplanes in that building there.
Yeah, it's there's many people have come and gone through there. Many people have been there. But really enjoy it. There's no question it's a premier place if you're going to build boats or repair boats or work on boats or engines.
Yeah.
The best of everything as far as facilities, to turn things over, or having molds, or just all the equipment you need to do what we do is all right there, and it's a blessing for us all to have it still.
Well, did you find any surprises in that shop when you opened the doors and it was yours then?
I think the biggest surprise, David, was just the vast amount of stuff that's still there.
Yeah.
After all those years, actually Bud had quit racing. Joe had quit racing, and many people had come and gone. A number of people had used the shop, and parts had been borrowed, bartered, sold, God knows what. All the T6 and the T5 were sold, and other things had been sold. Engines had been sold and those things. So it's I think the most pleasant thing was, wow, if this thing has been here, it's been actually 10 years or so since the Bud has actually worked out of this. The Bud guys had worked out of that shop, and there's still this much stuff. It's like, wow. So that was pleasant and very encouraging. So we're tickled to death to have it, and more happy to make sure that not only us, Miss Madison is promoting the city of Madison and being a good steward of our sport to help those that want to be a part of it. So it's not about me or not about any specific member of the team. We all work for Miss Madison, and Miss Madison most certainly is owned by the city, not by me.
Thinking about the sport and what you guys have done for it, there's been a lot of positives there, but the sport has been in some challenging years. More so lately than before. Where do you see things going for the future of the sport? I mean, I think back to it's probably a loaded question here, right? I just think back to the '90s. I was a kid and how big it was and potential of where it could go. And I know a lot of people love the sport out there and want to see it prosper. What in your mind, what do you see happening?
Well, I guess I'd have to preface the my rant, if you will, by the fact that I've spent obviously many years in the sport. Luckily or unluckily, I don't know which it is, with only one team. I don't know what, I never have taken the approach that the grass is greener over there. And I haven't jumped back and forth. I've always been a Miss Madison guy, but irregardless, I've tried to really understand the business side of it, which is my passion. The competition side, I'm not, as I mentioned earlier, I know I'm not much into the mechanical part of it, but I've looked at it for a long time, but primarily from a business side. And I think the biggest challenge that we have is getting back to a more business-like approach to the everyday workings, if you will, or the everyday agenda, or the everyday we'll call it the everyday business plan of H1. Needs to be more business oriented than it currently is. And until I see that, or until we see that, or until business sees that change, business people are not about tradition. They're not about fans' needs or wants. They're not about anything other than what's best for my business. And until we as a sport bless that and wrap our arms around that with every ounce of passion that we can, we'll struggle. We'll struggle. We won't have businesses and sponsors that want to get involved in something that is, I hate to use the word hobby, but in many respects it is. If we can't deliver on the things that I mentioned earlier that DeWalt needed, if we can't deliver on the things that Homestreet wants, or whomever it is, on a purely business level, then they won't invest their money. And it's probably not maybe not be the preferred circumstance, but any kind of motorsports today, especially at our level, requires dollars. Mm-hmm. Things don't come for nothing, and they require dollars. And until H1 and the teams themselves bless the mentality that whatever it takes to satisfy the sponsor on a business to business level. There are those that do it on some level that makes some sense, but not on a large scale. In many respects, it's a fun thing to do in Pasco and Seattle. Not as much now as it used to be, but there are a lot of teams that can obtain sponsorship for Pasco and Seattle because it makes some level of business sense, but mm-hmm. It doesn't really make total business sense. Some of it has a personal component to it, but until we get to the point where you can make a real case for a DeWalt, or you can make a real case for a Pringles or a Budweiser, or they're still spending money. There's no mm-hmm. question about that. Mm-hmm. But until we can make a case that they can get value by being a part of what we have to offer, then it'll be a real challenge. And we've been fortunate that Miss Madison has been able to deliver what Alberta wanted. and currently what Homestreet wanted, and some of our previous sponsors, and on a business to business level. And when that, I think when that trend changes back to way you talk about back in the 90s, okay? Just look at the sponsors that were back in the 90s. Well, back in the 90s, people felt like they didn't do it because they loved to do it. They do it because it made business sense, you know. And the DeWalt example that I gave you earlier is a perfect case.
Yeah,
the perfect case.
Yeah.
You know, they got 2% market share. Makita's kicking their ass, literally kicking their ass.
Yeah.
In the marketplace. Makita came out with the first real high production, you know, the first cordless drill. And DeWalt said, we're going to kick their ass, and here's how we're going to do it. And they went to Lowe's and Home Depot and convinced them to buy those $40,000 per day times 160 days. And look what happened to their market share and sales. And so those are just examples of the goals and objectives that need to be able to take place. You know, and you can dissect that down to, well, you need TV, you need this, you need that. You know, you need a lot of things. But I think first and foremost, we have a good fan base. We have good so far as that the sites have done a good job of keeping their events manageable, attractive, profitable, and entertaining for their fans. Now they've had to divest and do air shows and other things to make it work, but they've done a good job. And so there are things to sell. Yeah. And when we figure out that, you know, company XYZ wants to reach out and sample to the 50,000 fans that show up at Tri-Cities or whatever the number is, and convince them that that is a good investment of their money, they'll show up. Not because they like the Tri-Cities or they don't like her or they like Seattle or they Detroit. It makes no difference. They're all about selling product, whatever it is that they sell. I guess I could go on and on, but that's kind of the overview. And for, at least for me, is you know, we need to get back to more of a if we're really gonna make it work, more of a business-like approach. And I think it starts with H1.
Well, and another aspect of the future, you know, question marks of the future of the sport, the power plant. If you had any, like, you know, opinion on where the sport should go, looking towards the future for power plant, because we know turbines are more and more scarce and rare. Is there an alternative that you see working for H1? I know there's been some meetings and talks about it in the past. And
there's certainly, at least on our part, there have been a number of steps in that direction. I think the fact that the turbines have been around for a while, they're very good. They're very, we know all the attributes. We don't need to talk about the attributes. They are what they are, and those are all very good things. I think one of the challenges is that there's a finite supply.
Right.
Okay, and with the finite supply being what it is, there has to be a next, if you will, a next phase, or at least in my view, and it has to have one that has a more commercial application to people who want to do business in our sport. So we've been fortunate, at least I have. I think that Miss Madison has allowed me to spend some time, effort, energy, and money and doing some research. So we're a long way down the road, and what comes next. That's been a little bit aggravated by the fact that when we bought the bud shop, we felt like this could be like a 5-year plan, if you will, because we had a new 5-year deal with Homestreet, and we had some really neat goals and objectives. One of the things that came out of the purchase of the bud shop was the dyno up in Lake Stevens. But fortuitous, I guess, in a bad way for us, not fortuitous, but in a bad way, that property up in Lake Stevens was owned by the city of Lake Stevens, where the dyno was located. So we owned the dyno, but the facility that it was in was leased property owned by the city of Lake Stevens.
Okay.
And they opted, as you're well aware, in the Northwest, most everything is grown, right? In county, everything is just grown exponentially out there.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And yeah, it's crazy. The growth. And Lake Stevens was not immune to that. And so the dyno was in what I called a 3-bay garage. And one bay was for the dyno, and the other 2 bays were for city of Lake Stevens maintenance people to work on trucks and maintenance vehicles and equipment that they need to service the citizens of the city of Lake Stevens. And so when the final renewal of the lease came up for renewal, Lake Stevens advised us that they needed the property for city services, and they would not renew the lease.
Wow.
And so what we had hoped would be a 5-year transition, allowing us to continue to use the dyno and service engines and offer that service to all of our, not only competitors but friends that run a turbine, that vanished after a little over a year and a half. Totally unexpected.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things. But what that really did for me and for Miss Madison was really, accentuate the fact that we need to get our act together and talk about post turbine. So we've done a lot of work. I personally have done a lot of work in that regard and met with a number of people and talking about those options. And as I've done that, in Seattle last year, it just so happened the NHRA had their event the same weekend as Seafair, and so we were able to meet with some of the NHRA people, and many of them, not all of them, but some of the top teams are based in Indiana.
Okay.
So especially Don Schumacher and the Schumacher Racing Team. Schumacher's got 7 teams in NHRA. And so we've developed a relationship with those guys. Thanks to Mark Evans. Mark started that thing and allowed us to be a kind of tag along, if you will, at Seafair.
Okay.
So kudos to Mark. Of course, Mark's kind of been into that type of stuff for a long time anyway. So we were just kind of doing our due diligence, and we continue to do that. So we're very much focused on what the next power plant may be. There's a multitude of options out there, certainly. And our focus is really to not only get something that's commercially viable, but something that will fit in with the business side of the sport and augment the business side of which has always been my focus. People that sell filters and belts and hoses and lines and fittings and pistons and cranks and God knows what. Now, I don't know if that's where we'll end up, but we're looking for partners. We're also very fortunate. Miss Madison is and has been to have the counsel of people like Forrest Lucas. Forrest sponsored the Madison Regatta for a number of years. Forrest is Indiana, lives in Indiana the majority of the time. He's got facilities in California. One of his main manufacturing facilities is an hour away from me here in Madison. He's got a home in Indianapolis. And so, and we've made friends with Forrest. And so he's a great resource, obviously involved in motorsports, as we all know, supports the Colts with the naming rights on that stadium.
Yep.
So, he's a great resource to talk about and how do we incorporate and how do we make this thing more attractive for people like him to get involved. So it's a multiple pronged approach, but one we're gathering data all the time, and know that while the transition is not going to happen next week, it is going to happen. And I'd like to be able to kind of lead the charge in that regard and see if we can make it work, because Miss Madison dearly loves the sport and wants to do our part.
I'm glad to hear that. Do you think we might see an automotive power plant in the Miss Madison next coming years, maybe?
I wouldn't commit to being a automotive.
Okay.
But I will tell you this, that I think in a Miss Madison supported unlimited, you'll see a different power plant than a turbine.
Okay.
In the not too distant future.
Okay.
What that'll be, I'm not in a position to say it's going to be X, Y, or Z. But I do know that we are, there's a lot of people who are very on a business level are very interested in what we're trying to accomplish and wanting to help. And so we're going to, where that's going to end up, I don't know. I know where I want it to end up, and we'll see if it, if that does in fact come to pass.
Okay.
Whether it's who's involved, I don't know. It's to me, it's the next challenge. We are extremely happy with our relationship with Homestreet and what they're trying to accomplish. But we're looking to the future, and we think that Miss Madison has the broad understanding on the business side of how to accomplish that. Our board is very supportive of what we're trying to accomplish. They're not only fans of the sport, but they're good business guys, and so our business conversations and our board meetings are very much what's the future of the sport look like, and how can we help support that. We are the, I don't know if we're the good guys or the bad guys, but we're we are certainly a high profile team.
Well,
I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's what we are. And so leaders need to lead, and as far as I'm concerned, we're going to do that.
Well, I'll call you good guys because you're doing a lot for the sport, and you're certainly trying to help it continue it into the future. So anyone doing positives for the sport, I say they're good guys. So
it depends on your perspective. I think some at times, maybe understand or don't understand, and but that's I can't do much about that. I just know that we have certain goals and objectives. First and foremost is support our city and promote our city. Second is to promote our sponsors, and third to make this sport better. We have whether it's on the beach, whether it's in the boardroom, whether it's on the water. We're extremely proud of what we've accomplished. We're a large team. I take anywhere from, not I, but our team takes anywhere from 15 to 20 people to every race. Yeah. So we're selling T-shirts, and we're doing Facebook, and we're doing God knows what. We got a display boat program going. We're running 2 boats, looking at possibly running 3 boats.
Really?
Looking at developing a new power plant, trying to do something with the dyno. So there's a lot going on in the Miss Madison world, and we're very excited about the future.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Well, I know it's super exciting to talk about these things. I know fans will be very excited to talk of different power plants. I think, in previous years with various types of, motors out there on the water. I mean, think of the years when there was maybe the early 80s when there was Allisons out there with Merlins and Griffin and turbines, and just the variety that package brings. So I'm excited to hear those possibilities of another power plant being used. And
there's significant technology out there in the age of computers that makes it such that, at least in my experience and talking, especially with these NHRA guys.
Yeah,
these guys are crazy. 300 miles an hour and a quarter mile. But it's interesting to talk to them, and even though I can't talk much on their level because I'm not a gearhead, but there are aspects of it that I do totally understand. And so it's been fun, encouraging, and very very promising. So we're hopeful, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, you said that there's possibility of racing 3 boats. I know last year you ran 2 boats at most of the races, and I kind of wanted to talk about what the challenges were for the team running 2 boats, but I want to hear a little bit more of the possibility of another boat coming out with your team.
Well, the 2 boat thing was something that we did last year, our first attempt at that, much to the chagrin of Mike Hansen. Mike is just absolutely, finds that to be a real challenge, and he's right. I couldn't agree with him more. But having said that, on the 3 boat team, we're looking at we've got a great relationship and a long-term commitment to support Homestreet. This year we brought on, and they called us as well. John Goodman from John Goodman Real Estate there in Seattle. John's a fan of our sport and wanted to be involved. And much of what John does, at least in our relationship, as I mentioned, John, what do you want to do? That's, it's not what I can do for John. It's what he wants to do and how can I support that? And so he was very honest and upright and forthright about what he wanted to accomplish. And one of the things he wants to do has a charitable component to it. Mm-hmm. So a number of his favorite charities in the Seattle area will be supported as part of what we do. Nice. So the boat will be the Miss Goodman Real Estate, and Jeff Bernard will drive it. And we'll be supporting a number of charities, and we're working through the details of that now. But I think the talk of the third boat really has come to light. Not really come to light, but it's always kind of been a part of one of the options, and that we have had a at least 15, 16, 17-year relationship with Alberto. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And obviously we've gotten to know Art very well personally as well as professionally. But in addition to that, we've also developed a great relationship with Larry Alberto, his wife Lynette, and their family, and his brothers and sister. So they obviously have a passion, and we're trying to figure out a way to keep them involved. Obviously, Mr. Goodman and his goal and objective is very much important. Homestreet obviously is our number one priority. Yeah. But this third boat thing is one that will be in consort with what Larry's wanting to do and maybe not want to do. I don't know. Larry's, those of us who know Larry and some of the people who listen to this interview will obviously can relate, because all of us know Larry, or virtually all of us know Larry on some level. Mm-hmm. I talk to Larry quite frequently. Larry's in Italy, building a home over there, or remodeling a home over there. And so we're very, very cognizant of what Larry wants to accomplish. And we're hopeful that we can satisfy what he and Alberto need. Alberto's involved, now that they've been sold, they have a little different goal and objective, if you will, on the business side. And so hopefully the Unlimiteds and H1 and powerboat racing can add value to their corporate objectives. And so we'll see where that plays out. So I'm certainly not looking forward to it happen next week or the week after, but it's one of those things that I'm not going to shy away from, and I'm not going to deny the fact that we really want to support Alberto. And there are a number of boats out there, and Hanson, he wants to kill me all the time when I even talk the thought of it or talk of it, but I think there's ways to make it work and not compromise what we're doing with Homestreet or with Goodman, but we'll see. I just think that we have a lovely facility, we have a good economy, we have a real passion for our sport on many levels, and we're very bullish about that. And so we want to support that. And if that means helping Larry and Alberto, along with Goodman and Homestreet, then hey, I'm all for it. I'll just have Larry make sure he pays me enough money to where I can just go hire a bunch of people to do it. He'll love to hear me say that, but I've said it to him many times anyway. So, Larry, it's all about the money, just how much you want to spend.
All right. Well, that's very exciting. Yeah, there are a lot of boats out there right now. There's a lot of boats in Detroit sitting around, and other parts of the country that that have possibilities. So that's really fun to think about.
There's many out there, and you speak of Detroit. I certainly hope we can figure out a way to get back to Detroit. That's a
yes.
That's a sore that needs to get mended.
Yeah.
Such great fans in Detroit, and such great history and great people. We just need to figure out a way to get back there.
Yeah, that would be huge for the sport to be back there. Unfortunately, I've never been able to be at that race. My dad, for whatever reason, never took me there. So I would love to experience an H1 race in Detroit, the Roostertail Turn, at some point in my life.
Well, if we end up with 2 boats or 3 boats back there, then maybe we just bring you along. And
Yeah.
There's many things that, like I say, we got anywhere from 15 to 20 people. What's another one? Bring you along, and there's always things to do, whether it's marketing or selling T-shirts or working on turbines or God knows what. There's a lot to do. So,
all right. Well,
I'm,
I'm ready. I'll be waiting by the phone. So how about that? Well, I know you knew Bernie Little. Everyone around the sport did. He was such a big part of it. I just wonder if you had any good Bernie stories you could share with us.
I've got a bunch, certainly. But I think my favorite, and I'll try and condense it as best I can, was, and literally there could be dozens of them, but the one that really always sticks out in my mind was Bernie was in Madison at the Madison Regatta, and there's a riverboat casino called Belterra Casino, just about 15 miles upriver from Madison. And Bernie heard that Ray Charles, obviously a number of years ago before he died, but I believe it was Ray Charles, was performing at Belterra that night. And so Bernie wanted to go. And so we were able to arrange that. And afterwards, Bernie ended up at the blackjack table. And he'd reserved the table for himself and Bill, who was with him, and his wife Jane. And Jane got up and left. And Bernie was playing the reserve table by himself. And he was playing large amounts of money and playing 3 hands. And I stood there a few minutes, and he was losing his hat, ass, and overcoat. And get in there. He said, get in there and break them cards up. And I said, I can't play for that kind of money, you know. And he said, well, what can you play for? And I said, I can play for $25 a hand. Get in there. And so sure enough, Bernie was playing 3 hands and I was playing 1. And for whatever the reason, Bernie started winning. And I was hit and miss. And I just really just enjoying the evening, and the $25 a hand was really more than I could afford at the time. But so what? Sit down there, Charlie. Sit down there, and dealer in where you know what, he's not treating me fair and just bitching to the high heavens. Turns out Bernie ended up getting on a win streak and started winning, and I ended up losing about $500. And I just had enough. I said, Bernie, I got to go. I've lost all I can afford to lose. I'm out of here. And I'm not much of a gambler anyway. And so, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Well, he's still playing, drinking and having a good time. So the next morning, I get up and walk down to the boat. And I don't know if you've ever been to Madison, but right at the top of the pit ramp, before you go down over the hill into the pits, Bernie's bus was always parked there at the top of the ramp. And this was early in the morning. And he was sitting out there in front of his bus in a chair by himself, drinking a cup of coffee. And Charlie yelled at me, hey, Bernie, how you doing? He said, how'd you come out last night? I said, I didn't do worth a shit. I said, how'd you do? And he told me what he won. It was a large amount of money. And he said, well, what happened? I said, well, just like you said, that dealer wasn't worth a shit. And he said, well, what'd you lose? And I said, well, I lost $500. You lost $500? I said, yeah, I lost $500. He said, hold on a minute. So he walked up in the bus and came back and he said, here. He gave me $500 bills. He says, thank you. So thank you, Bernie. And so I was forever grateful. And we talked about that a number of times since that time. You ever want to, let's go up to Belterra and play some cards again. So like I say, there's many, many stories, but that was one of the ones where Bernie paid me $500, gave me my $500 back. So it was a fun time.
He was a generous man, wasn't he?
Very generous. taught me a lot about the business of hydroplane racing, and which as I mentioned, I mentioned multiple times in our conversation, was the part that really intrigued me. But very much so, was all about the business of our sport, and was great just to be in his presence, listen to what he had to say, even the gruff nature at times, but it was always in good fun, good positive vibe, very much in the interest of making this thing better. So yeah, he was quite a unique individual. Threw me out a number of parties, like I'm sure all of those that can, he had a dress code, and if you didn't meet the dress code, then he greeted you at the door, and I'm sure hundreds, if not thousands, of people who were involved with him would tell you the same thing. If you didn't show up in the right attire, you either go back and get the right attire on or don't come in. So it was, everything about the relationship was, especially for a young guy, was very good, and I cherish those times.
Well, yeah, I did hear a story about something about in Miami one year. He threw you out of a party. Can you share about that one?
Yeah, there was rumor that at this party he was having, he had and I don't want to embellish it much. I think it's all, but it turns out, and it's kind of immaterial. He had a 18-foot John boat inside this party, and had a divider down the middle of this little fishing boat. It's just like a little John boat. And on one side of the divider was shrimp. On the other side was, I don't know if it was lobster or oysters on the half shell. I don't recall which it was.
Yeah.
But anyway, the rumor was that was there. And so you obviously, who does not want to go have a beer and stand in front of an 18-foot boat and eat shrimp all night long, right?
Yeah.
Especially on Bernie. So we finagled a way to get in there some way, somehow. And maybe because he wasn't at the door or he wasn't greeting people. I don't recall the circumstance, but I do recall later him coming up and saying, "Hey, you don't have the right attire on. You got a coat upstairs, don't you?" And I said, always have a coat when you're around. And he said, "Go put the GD coat on or don't come back." And I said, "Okay, all right. If that's the rules," he said, "that's the rules." So I did, and didn't have to wear a tie, but you had to wear a coat, and went down and enjoyed beer and shrimp on Bernie. So.
Oh, that's funny.
Miss those days.
Yeah.
There was, he fed us at virtually every race, the volunteers as well as the teams. Had cookouts and had pig roasts in Madison, and virtually everywhere we went, he fed us. So those are just all good times, and all part of the rich history of being a part of this thing with him and Anheuser-Busch.
And they were good meals too. I remember a few meals when I was on teams with my dad on Muscatel's team. That we go for the weekend lunches by Bernie, and it was good food there. He pulled out some good spread.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for those of us that had the pleasure of racing with him or against him or what have you, he didn't do anything halfway. Whether it was running his race team, running his business, or running a meeting, or providing lunch. Everything was very much first class, just like that coach that he pulled in the pits, and just like the boats and the chrome vices on the trailers and those things. It was very much was done to a standard that he wanted to project, and he certainly made sure that happened.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know I'm gonna switch gears here a little bit and talk about family in the sport. There's so many people, they share this sport with their family. I shared it with my father for many, many years. I hope to share it with my son when he's old enough. I'm sharing it now. He's only 5, but sharing what I can with him. And I know you share a lot of it with your family as well. They come to some of the races and help you sell merchandise and do other things with you. What does it mean to you to have them involved, and how did you get them to be so involved with you?
Yeah, I've been fortunate, at least in my entire career. with Miss Madison that in the early part of my career, um, I was fortunate that my wife and my kids allowed me to go. Like I said, I hadn't missed a race since 1980. So I obviously been to a lot of races and traveled the world with this thing, all with the support of my wife and my daughters. But I had 4 daughters. On a personal level, I don't like to get involved in it and talk much about it. But on some level, I mean, it's just the truth. It is what it is. I mean, one of my daughters was handicapped. My oldest daughter was handicapped, and she was only supposed to live between 3 to 5 years. Her injuries were suffered at birth, and so she was we kept her at home. She was supposed to live 3 to 5 years, and turns out she lived to be 27.
Oh, wow.
But she lived the entire time with us in our home. And so my wife and my other 3 daughters obviously took care of her as they were growing up, and as I was out chasing the proverbial race boat, right? And that worked fine. Everybody was supportive of that. But when Christy died at 27, it was kind of I guess I can say it, it was an oh shit moment. Like, oh shit, now we can actually go do something, because, before she wasn't able to travel and wasn't able to go with us. And so that evolved into a circumstance where my wife and my 3 daughters felt like, okay, now we can actually go enjoy this. And so they were fans. And so they began to travel. And for the last number of years, virtually 10 or so, they've traveled with us at virtually every event. And so it's been good to have them. They view it as my daughters. I say my daughters. They view it as good time to have with mom and dad that we just didn't have. We didn't have family vacations as they were growing up, young kids. They didn't have. I was gone, but the girls didn't. We didn't go to Disneyland for family vacation because somebody had to take care of Christy. Yeah. And then once Christy passed, the oh shit moment happened, and what turns out the oh shit moment was the kids can now travel. So even though one's 40, one's 35, and one's 30, they still enjoy going with mom and dad. It's still good to travel with us and hang out. So they do their thing, and which is sell T-shirts and do the things for the sponsor, whether it was Alberto or whether now it's Homestreet or whomever the sponsor may have been. Actually, in their career of traveling with us, it's just been with Alberto and with Homestreet. So it's been a great family thing for them to really enjoy. They do their thing, I do my thing, and we kind of find it as a good family bonding time. In fact, it's even gone so far as all my daughters are in healthcare, and as a part of their, in fact, the 2 youngest ones are both doctors. So I've had them negotiate in their contracts that if they want, and they wanted to, certain time off. And that certain time off happens to center around all the boat race weekends. So we make it a family affair. They have fun hanging with their mother. They find it cool, and which I find cool that they do at their age. And so it's been a blessing the last 10 years or so to have them be a part of it and get to know what this thing is all about that I've been doing forever. And they're like me and you, they're hooked. So it's been fun.
Big time. Well, it's nice that you can share it with your family. It's very special to find something that you can share with your family. So it's nice that you have that with them.
Yeah, it was a challenge up to the point of losing Christy, but since then it's been a real blessing, and we're certainly making the most of it and enjoying all the time we can. It's great to have the kids with me and wherever we go. In fact, I end up taking my wife to Doha a number of times as well. So it's been rewarding and makes the challenges even better. To include them in the fun.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed our episode. Make sure you come back next week to listen to our next episode. We release new episodes every Tuesday at 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button on your podcast player, as well as rate and review your experience. For more updates on Hydro News, check us out on social media. We're on the major players, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Roostertail Talk is also online with our website, www.roostertailtalk.com. On the website, you can sign up for an email subscription list to get notifications on upcoming episodes, Hydro News, podcast updates, and much, much more. Finally, this is a free podcast to all of our listeners. And if you're really enjoying your experience and want to help us to continue to grow and expand, please donate. You can find a link to donate through PayPal on our website through the support tab. So until next time, I hope to see you at the races.